Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George, coming at you from the campus of Iowa State University. And we're going to talk pure politics today. You know, there was a time not too long ago when if you'd have told me somebody was going to do a podcast on politics, I'd have went, oh, God, not politics. That's so dull. Well, not anymore. Politics are, I say it's the new blood sport for people that don't like football. Politics are getting very interesting. We got to be paying attention to this because it's getting dicey here in America, and we got to make some wise choices. We got to make some wise decisions here when it comes to the next election, and we're going to talk about all that today with a world-renowned, certainly U.S.-renowned expert on politics, and that is Steffen Schmidt. He's a Ph.D. He's the Lucken Endowed Professor of Political Science at Iowa State University. And he's also an associate of Nova Southeastern University, the Oceanography Center. You'll see where that plays into this a little later on in the podcast. Now, he grew up in Colombia, South America, studied in Colombia, Switzerland, and France. He speaks 4 languages. He obtained his BA from Rollins College, Winter Park, Florida, and his PhD from Columbia University, New York, in public law and government. Professor Schmidt has published 11 books and over 80 articles in scholarly journals. He's the recipient of numerous prestigious teaching prizes, including the Amico Award for Lifetime Career Achievement in Teaching and the Teacher of the Year Award. He's also the co-author of the most widely used American government textbook, American Government and Politics Today, the 2015-16 edition, that's read each year by over 200,000 college students at over 200 colleges and universities. The book was recently translated into Chinese by Peking University. Now, he's got such bona fides, as I like to call it, that I'm going to have to read this quickly. I'm going to sound like the guy at the end of a credit card commercial, but here, let's see how I do. His free online course on the Iowa presidential caucuses was launched in September 2015. He is a pioneer in the use of web-based and real-time video courses, as well as the use of technology in the classroom, and in August of 2000 received the Master Teacher Award for his work in that area. Schmidt is a founding member of the Computers and Information Technology section of the American Political Science Association. He chaired the Information Technology Proposed Standards Committee for Political Science Professions. He's also done extensive research in Latin America and has written about women's roles and rural life in that region, including a monograph entitled Latin America, Rural Life and Agrarian Problems. He's currently conducting research on coastal and seashore politics and policy. He's also designing new multi-level college courses on coastal policy and international integrated coastal management taught on the web. These will also include the in-the-field experiences at seashore venues, under the water, scuba diving, which he does, and top of the water, snorkeling, and boat-based exploration and study. Now, Dr. Schmidt recently published the essay on coastal water management and water science, an encyclopedia reference book. Now, stay with me. This stuff's all going to come into play here later on. He also wrote 4 essays on coastal-related subjects for Dictionary of American History, and the articles are Bermuda, Long Island, yacht racing, and coast and geodetic service, and several essays on coastal management for the forthcoming Encyclopedia of Public Administration. Professor Schmidt has had a weekly 1-hour talk show on WOI Radio, public radio, where he's been known as Dr. Politics. God, are we glad to have him on a podcast by George. Now, that show has been done live from Prague, Mexico City, Vancouver, Bogota, and other U.S. and international venues. His current weekly call-in talk radio program can be heard on KASI Radio. That's an alma mater of Podcast by George. I was a news director on that station back about 1980. And he's on there Mondays from 10 to 11 a.m. Central Time, and at WNHN-FM 94.7 in Concord, New Hampshire. The Attitude on Thursdays at 11:30 Central Time. His comments on American politics and international affairs are frequently quoted in the New York Times, USA Today, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and many other national and international publications. Is that all? Oh, that's not all. He lives on a farm here in central Iowa. He likes to snow ski, ride hunter jumper horses, scuba dive, and sail large offshore sailboats. He travels extensively in the Caribbean, San Juan, Seattle area, the Croatia area, the Kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific, Boston, and Latin America. You know what I think of? Now, I don't know if we're going to use all of that introduction because there's so much of it, but when I read a bio like that, what strikes me is, God, have I wasted my life? I mean, what a list of accomplishments compared to what I've been able to put together in 60-some years, I mean, that's just great stuff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And I haven't spent enough time on one thing to go deeper than a half an inch. And so that's how I managed to spend time doing so many different things. And I enjoy doing those. I'm not very good at concentrating and focusing on just one thing. And I think that you can learn a lot from doing all kinds of stuff. The whole thing that you read is actually from a fake website that I put up that every once in a while people fall for it and they grab that stuff and I get a few speaking engagements or,
Yeah.
I mean, do you know what fake news is or not? You don't. You have no idea. We have no idea.
Well,
you can make up a site that has all this stuff, and you can be skydiving, and you can be going up on a rocket to Mars.
Well, people on dating sites do that stuff all the time.
They do it all the time. And the politicians, when you go to their websites, you know that half of that is dubious.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's great.
Yes, sir.
Well, let's. I'm going to start off what's top of mind with me. I was up here yesterday at Iowa State University, and I was at a speech by Governor Jay Inslee. And he's talking about climate change. That's where he's going to hang his hat. That's going to be his priority number one issue as a candidate. My question for you is you look over the vast array of Democratic presidential candidates, as many as 30 out there. What do you think when you see somebody at this stage getting in the race? Why are they doing that? And the reason I ask that, climate change is important to him. Well, it's important to the other 20-something candidates that are out there. It's going to be top of mind with them as well. Why would a guy want to get into the race to talk about climate change?
Well, why they get in the race is obvious, and that is the field is wide open. There is no front runner, really. There's no president who's running for another term, and that's when you have a chance to score. And, so as many people with big egos say, I want to be president. Inslee happens to be pretty qualified as governor of Washington State. Climate has been one of the big things that he's used to restructure a lot of stuff in Washington State. But I personally, when he rolled that out with his speech and his first ad, said, you probably should talk first about how we need better jobs, that we need better infrastructure, that we need to go with all kinds of new technologies for transportation and fuels, and talk about the economy, improving people's lives and health care in a world that is changing and where climate is becoming an issue. So start with that, and don't start by saying that climate change is the biggest threat, because that turns off a whole bunch of people right away. Because none of the candidates that are running or are about to run in the Democratic caucuses in Iowa and the primaries are not talking about climate change. They're all talking about it. And so coming out with that is just one more, even though he's probably more qualified than some of them. But I think, that's a little bit, let's call it too gigantic, and several of the Democrats that have rolled out, this new Green Deal, which some of the more progressive Democrats like Ocasio-Cortez in New York and Congressman Merkley rolled out. If you give people something that's so big that they can't see how we can possibly get our fingers around it, they just sort of shut down. And to say that we're going to basically stop climate change and that we're going to ground all airplanes and take away people's hamburgers because there's too much methane coming from the cows that are pooping in the in the feedlots, people go, that's gigantic. It's like going into space and exploring some new universe. And I think if you give people something that looks realistic, that is bite-sized, where you can say, here are some things that I want to do, and we need to move more quickly to try and control the things that are creating global warming and the warming of the oceans and sea level rise. And here are the things we're going to do. And we're doing those so that people's health is better, so that we don't have famines, migrations, and violence around the world because of droughts and other climate-caused catastrophes. That's why we're doing these things, and these are doable, and we'll do some every year for the next 8 years, because I'm going to be president, and I'm going to be president for 8 years, and every year we're going to take a little bite out of this. It's the story, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. You don't try to swallow the whole darn thing.
Yeah.
And some of them are missing that, that point.
I agree. I mean, it's an excellent point. I mean, it's an excellent way to make it, because I looked at it and I thought, everybody's trying to hang their hat on a particular vertical, kind of a niche market. They're trying to strip away a little bit of the Democratic base and claim it as their own. You've got Inslee as an example. He wants to talk about climate change. I saw Tulsi Gabbard. She wants to talk about regime-changing wars, which he's very qualified to talk about. Very compelling speaker and candidate, by the way. You got Bernie, who's still out there wanting to eat the rich, as far as taking some of that money back from the rich people. Yep. Everybody's got their own twist or angle on this. And then there's the perspective, do the Democrats want a progressive, or do they want a moderate in the middle that can reclaim some of the ground they lost from the middle that may have cost them the election last time around?
That's a great question, and if I had the answer, I wouldn't be sitting here for free talking to you.
Yeah.
But the answer is Hillary Clinton was a moderate. She wasn't a liberal.
Right.
She was a moderate. She got $300,000 for speaking to bankers and other people on Wall Street. She wasn't, way out there on climate change and the environment.
She voted for the Iraq War.
Yeah, sure. But that, a lot of people voted for that. And, the whole point is that I think that if you lean too far to the left in the Democratic Party, the farther you lean left, the more you're going to probably lose some of the support that you need, including in the primaries and caucuses, but especially if a really progressive Democrat gets nominated, I think it's going to hurt them with independents. You got to remember, your listeners are smart enough to know that no Democrat or Republican can win unless you can get a chunk of the no-party voters, the people who are not Democrats or Republicans. They swing back and forth, sometimes between one or the other. And I think those people tend to be, more moderate. They tend to be more kind of in the middle and not out, with some very clear and sharp ideology.
Well, take that a step further then, is that some would say that the key to this is getting some of the more liberal, progressive, younger minority voters to activate and vote. If they do that, you can win. Other people look at it and say, no, what you need are those independents and those moderates, those people from the middle. If you can activate those, you win. Which holds true?
Well, the answer, of course, logically, is both. I mean, the Democrats have to get a good turnout from African-American voters, black voters, Latino voters, which Hillary Clinton didn't really do so well with.
Exactly.
Although she won 3 million more popular votes. Is Donald Trump listening? 3 million more popular votes than Trump. So Hillary Clinton did pretty well.
Yeah.
But not well enough. And especially if you look at where, which is, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, some of those states, if more black voters had turned out there, she probably would have won the electoral votes and be president now. So that was a very bad mistake that Hillary Clinton's campaign made, in assuming that in some of those states, the Democrats and she would win, and didn't mobilize and go and excite a lot of the voters. And there are large cities with large minority voter populations there. But you also have to get the independents, and the independents, they kind of waffle back and forth. So it's a fine line, and I think, everybody is saying that if Joe Biden jumps in, aside from the fact that the very progressive Democrats are going to hate it because, A, he's an old man, number two, he's got a bunch of blemishes in his hearings with Anita Hill and the Supreme Court confirmation of Clarence Thomas. But other than that, he's popping up in most of the polls as the number one choice of Democrats who are likely to vote. Right now, at least. Now, if he jumps in, and he looks like he's going to jump in by the time this podcast runs, he may already be in. That is going to be very interesting to watch, because already you're seeing some Democrats who were going to run, like Sherrod Brown of Ohio, who a lot of people thought was a good potential candidate. He dropped out today. And
I did not know that. I've been playing hockey. I didn't hear
that's why you come here for breaking
to
news.
Get the news.
You know,
a lot of people had high hopes for him because he was from Ohio, and he won by 10 points, and they thought he could, and that might make the difference. Ohio,
yes,
adios, huh?
And now it's not adios, because I just talked to a very good friend and smart political consultant just about half an hour ago, and she said, well, you know, he would make a great vice presidential candidate for some other Democrat who runs as a presidential candidate. And that can help quite a bit. If you have a vice presidential candidate
they can bring
on
that
the ticket,
state.
it can really excite people. You know, if your guy and you know or woman is on there, and so that might work. Even if he's not running for president itself. So, but the field will get winnowed. It's too big. And I think the issues, I do a very careful scrutiny of the polls every week, at least every week. And at the top of the polling, what are the issues that Americans want addressed? Number one is health care.
Yeah.
Whether you're a conservative, a Republican, a Democrat, or a liberal, health care is number one. For Democrats, unfortunately, immigration is number two, and it's immigration reform, trying to tighten up the borders, but also to try and integrate people who are in this country and have been here for a long time. And so immigration is number two, and then come jobs and other things. It's shocking. The environment is not up very high on the list of when you ask people, what's the most important issue that you think in the next election you want candidates to help address?
Should it be higher? I ask you this way. I saw Governor Inslee yesterday. I went up and asked him, I said, and I'm sure you've heard this too, there's some climate scientists out there, maybe more of the extreme scientists, but they're saying there's a 7-year window with this climate change thing, that we have to get this resolved. We've got to make some real progress, get this reversed, and get things going here in 7 years, or catastrophic results.
Well, yes, you know, and that may be, and catastrophic, you know, that's okay too. I mean, you know, who cares about Miami if it's underwater and make a great dive site? I've already booked.
What you know about it?
I've already booked a dive. No, I booked a dive boat already out of the Bahamas.
You can dive off a park bench off the street.
Yeah, no, you go in a dive boat and the greatest underwater diving, you know, since whatever movie had that in the end.
Yeah.
So what'll happen is the world has had this for millennia, which is things change. You know, things go underwater, things come out of the water. Florida was never dry land. Florida at one point, in my coastal policy class, the reason I like coastal policy is because it addresses all these issues of coastal regions and warming seas, which are the main factor responsible for climate catastrophes, because some of the ocean currents will change with the warmer water and will bring frightening cold weather and blizzards, believe it or not, to places like England and Ireland, and places where the warm Gulf current, which is a warm ocean current, has kept them nice and warm, because it goes all the way up the east coast of the U.S. and then swoops around England and Ireland. I mean, I was in the westernmost part of England, the Isles of Scilly, and they got palm trees all year round outdoors because it's so warm. You don't think of England as having palm trees. So, we need to work on it. We've already had devastation. I mean, the war in Syria is largely the result of a massive drought that exterminated a lot of villages, killed off all the cattle. Farmers had to migrate into cities where they came in contact with people that they couldn't get along with, or the people there couldn't get along with them. And that's why you have a lot of the violence in Syria already. The U.S. military is, and we don't talk about that much. The other day I had to send some of my scientist friends in environmental science the military position on it, which is, unless we slow this down and get it under control, the U.S. military is going to be chasing after massive migrations of people and huge violence. And you think right now we've got a problem. And why do we care? Because places that are unstable, where people are starving and where tyrants and warlords take over, those are a threat to us now, because they can come here, and we are a global power, so we need to be aware of that. Plus, the U.S. military stands to lose a lot of, or almost all of their coastal naval bases. If the sea level reaches the point that we project it will, those bases are obsolete. We're going to have to move those up the mountains a little bit, because they're going to be hit by storms, and the ships, ships can't really take storms very well. So it is something that we need to talk about. But most voters don't want apocalyptic, scenarios drawn by politicians. And Ocasio-Cortez excites a lot of people and scares the heck out of a lot of people who say, really, no more hamburgers, no more airplanes, and the government is going to really run everything. Wow, that sounds like 1984. And you don't want to do that. I think that's going to potentially be quite a problem for a lot of Democrats, even though some of them like to hear those warnings. And so this is where the Democratic Party is. They've got to decide what they want to focus on. And poor Nancy Pelosi, is trying to herd the cats and trying to figure out how to carve out a party platform and position and agenda that is doable, where they can actually get something done and that doesn't scare people. And she's having a hard time. She got challenged for her leadership to begin with.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that elephant in the room that just seems to reside there. Bernie Sanders, what do you make of his... Already I'm seeing huge rally turnouts and the same kind of stuff as last time around. And what's happening with Bernie, do you think? What's going to happen with Bernie?
Bernie is, a very charismatic leader to a lot of people. And strangely enough, a lot of them are young people. They love the idea of this fiery older guy who has never changed his position on anything, who believes and wants justice. And they like that whole idea. And they like the free tuition, too, by the way.
Yeah.
So you can go to a college campus and on free tuition.
And he's got a college debt thing, too, that must be appealing.
College debt to be basically paid off. I heard that he's planning to, or is thinking about also saying that everybody can get, free tequila, but I'm not sure. I found that on a website somewhere, but I'm not sure.
That'll bring the younger vote in.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. And so Bernie is an interesting phenomenon because we thought, and he's not a Democrat, he's a socialist. We have to constantly say Bernie is not a Democrat, but he's running as a Democrat. And that is shocking to a lot of people, because socialism was something that, the French and the Germans and the Italians did. And those people we know, that, they don't know what they're doing. And so all of a sudden now you get a lot of approval rating on that poll that was done at Harvard of students who said, yeah, socialism is okay. And of course, in Germany and places like that, the Social Democratic Party did a lot of good things. They created a good health care program in the country and created labor participation in industry. In Germany, the labor unions are not the enemy of the industry. They actually sit on the board of directors of companies and participate in the discussion of compensation and healthcare. Well, healthcare is already a benefit in Germany, but pensions and other things. And so if it's democratic socialism, I guess some people think Sweden, Norway, those countries, Scandinavian countries, they're doing really well. Standard of living is high. They forget that those are also very homogeneous countries.
Yes.
They don't have any race problems.
Yes.
Now they do, because in Sweden now the number of Muslims has increased dramatically. It's got one of the highest percentages of Muslims, and there is a gigantic backlash, and they're now moving way away from socialism and moving to the right and nationalism. So when we talk about where we're headed, Bernie Sanders has his constituency, and it's a big chunk, and he did well in Iowa. He didn't make it all the way. Hillary Clinton beat him, but he'll probably be one of the top three, maybe, I'm thinking, because there's some other wannabe socialists, but they don't have what he has. Yeah. He's got a name recognition. He's now got a real base. I mean, he raised $10 million or something in the first 48 hours of announcing.
Yeah, I know. It was
That's unbelievable.
And
None of it came from big donors.
Yeah, holding these huge rallies again already.
Yeah.
You know, I saw where like 89% of Republicans support Donald Trump. Do you see a primary challenge for Trump coming?
Well, there is. William Weld, the former governor of Massachusetts, is going to challenge him. It's a hopeless cause.
That's what I was asking. Yeah, do you think it'll amount to anything?
I sent William Weld a life jacket because I said, "You're going to be way up to your neck in salt water." No, Donald Trump has. If we are puzzled about Bernie Sanders, we should be equally amazed at Donald Trump, who, in spite of being so controversial and doing so many things that normally would disqualify somebody from continuing to be supported, has a magic touch. He is a charismatic leader. He has a constituency that doesn't care what he does because, first of all, they just don't see any other Republican that they like very much. They don't see any Republican they like very much.
No, I don't either. I can see that.
And they don't see any Democrat they would ever vote for.
Right, under any circumstances.
And they don't know who's going to be the alternative to Trump in 2020 because the Democrats haven't sent out a signal saying, this is our team. You know? I mean, we don't know who their team is. We won't know it until February 3rd, and then after the caucuses, the New Hampshire primary, the California primary. It's going to be a while before there is a real Democrat who has the banner of the Democratic Party. And the Democrats also don't have a good brand. I said that to one of my radio hosts in the show this morning in Concord, New Hampshire. I said, Arnie, the Democrats don't have a baseball cap with a short slogan on it. They don't have any gear. And if you don't have a brand, it's hard for you to cheer and get people at rallies to cheer for that brand. And I don't know what that would be, but they need to come up with something.
They need to come up with something big because here's a statistic that's kind of scary that I saw. I think it was in Rolling Stone magazine. Actually, 90% of incumbents win when they run for their second term. Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump's got this huge support that is not wavering in his core, in his base. And that electoral college is still there. And that map of states hasn't changed any. And if the Democrats can't strip away some of those states that you talked about earlier, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, he's a shoo. I mean, he's going to win, folks.
Well, you're not allowed to run for president if you're in prison.
Yeah.
So, this is all assuming that there's nothing in the Mueller hearings, assuming that nothing is going to really come of all the hearings that the Democrats are going to run in the House, and that he'll be scot-free and have no legal liability. And it's very possible that will happen, even if they find something that is not a violation of the law, but is a violation, of the presidential dignity and stuff. The House could impeach him, and the Senate, if it's still controlled by the Republicans, which it would be because they control the Senate, they're never going to vote to convict him, I don't think. Now, he's had some defections from the Republican caucus to the Democrats. Next week, I think they're going to vote. Don't know when this podcast will run, but defections of Republicans who are going to vote with Democrats in the Senate to tell Trump that he cannot declare a national emergency. And that's interesting. There are as many as potentially, 11, they've said. But I'm really, really not sure that they would impeach him or convict him, because the way it works is the House basically charges you with crimes and misdemeanors, and then they send it to the Senate, and the Senate holds the trial and either acquits you or convicts you.
Right. So you got an excellent weather vane right here from the state of Iowa. Based on what you're describing, I would think of Charles Grassley. Mm-hmm. Is Charles Grassley going to convict Donald Trump? No.
No, I don't think
that ain't
so.
happening.
And Joni Ernst won't either.
No way.
And neither will Steve King.
True. Coming out of the House.
Well, in the House, he will vote against it. And, to be honest with you, in the House, Nancy Pelosi is not really excited about impeachment. she said several times, and there some of the younger, really radical, hot ones want to impeach him, like today.
I know they do.
You know, they do because they
Be careful
say,
what you wish for, though, on that level, because that could come back to bite them.
Yeah, and that's why Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the older, more, let's call it, sort of far-looking Democrats are saying, that's not where we want to go right now, because we really don't have enough to do this, and politically it probably isn't such a great idea. So I'm not sure that will come to pass. But the Democrats need to come up with a slogan, with a focus, a mission, a party platform. I mean, Donald Trump won with one party platform position, only one, that he repeated every couple of minutes in tweets and at every single rally that he ever held, and that is illegal immigrants and building a wall.
Yeah.
That is how he really galvanized his support base. And the Democrats need to come up with a couple of things maybe, but that every single rally, every single speech they give, they can emphasize and get people very excited and mobilized and willing to register or vote and give money to the party. And I don't know what that is yet, because as we talked when we started here, they're all over the map, even though climate change and, a Green Deal, environmentalism seems to be one of those. I'm not sure if that's good enough. I mean, there's a Green Party that's been pushing that forever, and they never get anywhere. Mm-hmm. They get a few people elected in New Mexico or somewhere.
And it's not like natural disasters aren't happening to support it, and it hasn't turned, the opinion much.
But there is no global warming, because I'm looking out my window right now at Iowa State, and it doesn't look like global warming, right? Even though the climate change is extremes of hot and cold and dry and overly wet, because what it does is it messes with the traditional patterns of climate and weather, and it doesn't mean that it's all hot everywhere. In some places it's way colder and more snowy and wetter, because you're upsetting all of these different, very carefully balanced environmental tools that exist on Earth that shape the climate. And as I said, the oceans and the sea currents are, and salt water versus fresh water, and the icebergs and the gigantic amount of water that's trapped in the Arctic and Antarctica. Remember, that's all fresh water trapped, frozen.
Yeah.
So when that breaks off, and some of it is the size of Rhode Island,
right,
and falls into the ocean, now it's no longer frozen and out of the water. It now falls into the water. I mean, have you ever dropped too many ice cubes into a glass?
Yeah.
And, it spilled it all over.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what is going to happen.
That's Miami that we were talking about earlier.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
And Miami's already half underwater.
Yeah.
They have $1 billion pumping system now, and it can't keep up with the water that comes up through the groundwater. So it is a big issue, but it seems, as I said, so big that a lot of people just get a headache because they can't see how we can possibly deal with that as the number one thing. So how do you do it in smaller bites? And I would urge the Democrats to, go that direction.
It's slightly technical. I guess I could give some people in the Tea Party or whatever it is that extreme right a pass because they can't seem to grasp it or understand it. I saw another statistic. I'm going to end with this. Donald Trump has done 44 interviews with Sean Hannity. Not one with CNN. 10 with the mainstream media. This guy is nothing but his White House, an extension of Fox News and or vice versa. Now, that kind of statistic, I would think anybody could figure out or understand and say to themselves, that's not right. And I like Barack Obama as a president, as an example, and I put it in this context, just turn it around. If somebody told me that Barack Obama did 44 interviews with Rachel Maddow, as a matter of fact, talked to her after every Rachel Maddow show. Trump talks to Sean Hannity after every show on the phone. If I was a devout Republican, I would look at that and say, that's not right. That's wrong. And I will not support that.
But let me tell you that it has worked.
Yeah.
And for people who are true believers and who think that their cause is the right cause, it's not what's right or wrong. It's what makes the cause stronger and supports it. And if it wasn't for Fox, I mean, Donald Trump would have zero media support, and he would be in huge trouble. But if you are a real conservative Republican, and even not conservative Republican, but you believe that Donald Trump is a better option no matter how controversial he is than a Democrat.
Than Hillary Clinton, particularly.
Than Hillary Clinton,
yeah.
or any of these
They say
Democrats,
that to this day, yeah.
or any of these Democrats right now. Then you say, well, it's a good thing that Donald Trump has an outlet that basically gives his point of view. It's a good thing that he has now a Twitter account, and that his tweets are his foreign policy, his domestic policy, his political agenda, because he is not being censored by all those creepy liberals of the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC, who are basically really biased and who want to overregulate. And I know a lot of people who are prominent, wealthy, well-educated, many of them extremely smart people in industry, banking, pharmaceutical industry, and so on. I know them very well. Some of them are actually family members. And they support the Republicans and Trump, even though they don't like Trump at all, because they say he is going to deregulate, and the other stuff, we just sort of ignore it. But the Democrats, wow, wait till they get in there. They're going to re-regulate. They're going to crush our business model. We are going to be squeezed to death, and the American economy is going to slow down again. And so better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Yeah.
And the African saying is better the devil you know or the angel you don't know, because, you figure there's an angel out there and there isn't really an angel. And so Trump has managed to essentially basically rewrite the Republican Party's platform and its position on a lot of issues, and it seems to be working because he's got his numbers are up there. Now his numbers with the average American voters are not that good.
Yeah,
the base is good, but we'll have to see if the. Did you know that after Hillary Clinton got the nomination, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Donald Trump? Did you know that a lot of Barack Obama voters voted for Donald Trump?
Yeah.
That seems extraordinary. And we don't know if they will do that again
I'll
in
bet
2020.
They don't. Yeah.
We'll see.
I think it was in those largely industrial urban areas, those swing states that we talked about, those people from those factories that had been closed down and they had seen no improvement. The rest of the country had, but there are those little areas, that pockets that have never recovered.
Well, there are lots of places in this country, and there are more of them every day, even with Trump. I mean, the auto industry is going through a huge revolution, and no matter what Trump says, there's no way to save some of those plants. And because, of the prosperity of this country, we're importing more stuff than we ever did before, and the trade deficit in the last numbers was unbelievable. I mean, we bought so much more from other countries than they bought from us, and that goes against what Trump was trying to do, which was to say they need to buy more of our stuff. So those things are all going to enter into the equation of how people vote. And I don't know how they're going to analyze what's happening, whether they'll blame Trump for it or they'll say, well, Trump is trying. And, it's all these radical Democrats and the Chinese and others that are, messing with us. And, Trump will fix all that. I mean, Iowa farmers in the United States are going bankrupt again at an unprecedented rate. Dairy farmers are going out of business, and many farmers committing suicides at rates not seen for decades. And yet the farmers don't seem to blame Trump for that.
No, Republicans, traditionally, farmers, my dad always said, farmers can't stand prosperity. He was a Democratic farmer. Well, let's leave it there. You're a busy guy, and I don't want to monopolize your time today because I want to revisit this. I want to keep coming back because this is great. I mean, an expert in politics and an expert in climate change. I mean, this I could talk about. We could spend all day here. So that's,
I do spend all day here.
Yeah, you do.
This is my office. Yeah.
But I got to go.
Thank you.
And that's Steffen W. Schmidt. He's the professor of political science at Iowa State University. And delighted to have him as a guest. And we're going to come back to this and talk more as we run up to these Iowa caucuses and, of course, the big 2020 presidential election. But for right now, that's another podcast by George.